Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding in Conflict. And I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And my guest today is Cathy Eads. She's a yoga teacher and an Ayurvedic, is that how you pronounce that, Cathy?
Perfect. Yeah.
Wellness counselor who helps people manage stress, anxiety, and chronic conditions through simple, powerful mind-body practices. After facing her own health challenges, financial stress, and a struggling marriage, Cathy discovered that yoga, meditation, and daily routines could restore calm and balance even in chaos. She now shares these tools to help others feel more grounded, resilient, and in control no matter what life brings. Welcome, Cathy Eads. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks so much, Catherine. I'm really glad to be here with you.
Well, even in your bio, you're very open about how your own life challenges led you to this journey of yoga and holistic healing. So, can you tell us a little bit more about how that journey shaped the work you do?
Yeah, sure thing. I actually did yoga for 15 years or so just to get physical exercise because I simply was not aware that yoga is so much more than just a physical activity. And so as I matured, my practice eventually got a little more mature, I guess you could say. And I had never, ever wanted to be a yoga teacher at all. I just was like, I will go to class, I will do my videos. I just wasn't interested to me, even though my sister was a teacher and she's like, you should take training. And I'm like, no. So for some reason in the middle of my separation, I just was very drawn to I am pivoting. I had left a job. I was ending my marriage. My third child was a senior in high school. I'm like, I am moving my entire life in a different direction. And I was like, I love yoga. Why not take a teacher training? See if that's where I want to go. And it opened my life up to the fact that yoga is really a way of life. It's a way of living with self compassion for yourself and for the environment and the people around you. And it just has made life so much more peaceful, so much more content, so much more calm. And it's enabled me to deal with a lot of the chaos, a lot of the health issues. I have a child who has some serious health issues as well, and realize like there's a certain amount of things that are under my control. And the biggest thing that's under my control is me and my thoughts and how I take care of myself. And then I'm so much better equipped to take care of all the other stuff outside of me that I don't have control over, but I can try to influence and do my best work with. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, I think that I don't want to jump to the end too fast here, but I'm just based on what you just said there, Cathy. I know that a lot of people listening say, okay, you say you control your thoughts, but I can't control my feelings. And I'm not sure that's totally true. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Well, that's how I feel and I can't help it. Like people say that all the time, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, what are your thoughts about that?
They're very closely connected because something outside of you can trigger a feeling inside of you. Then what you do with that emotion, because that emotion is information. I mean, that's what our emotions are for, to give us information about the things that we are experiencing. And then we can decide, how do we want to manage that emotion? Do we want to let it drive our behavior, or do we want to take a moment to feel it if it's positive, negative, or indifferent? I don't like to think as feelings themselves as being positive feelings or negative feelings. They're information, but how we choose to deal with them can make for a positive or negative result. And I'll be the first to admit, when I was going through my divorce, I would spend an entire day ruminating over stuff. And that just works you up. It increases your anxiety. I mean, it makes you distracted. You're not as productive. Like, there's so many things. I mean, also can kind of make you more emotional because you're already at this heightened state. So when something triggers an emotion, we can take a pause. I always suggest people like go immediately to your breath, because if your reaction is, because we want to do versus we don't want to have an emotional reaction and let that push our behavior or drive our behavior. We want to have a logical response. Now, that doesn't mean we won't be emotional. It just means how we deal with it is much more, we have more control over it and we don't feel so out of control. The feelings can be big. Let yourself feel the feeling and it'll last a few seconds. I mean, all the studies, scientific studies show when you first feel an emotion, it may feel intense and then you breathe for a few minutes, a few seconds even, and it will lessen. And as you breathe, extend your exhale because that cues your nervous system that you are safe and that you are in control of the situation. And you don't need to have all those stress hormones start coming in because when they do, it compels you to want to react. I mean, it's our reptilian brain. If it feels like we're threatened in any way, it thinks it's life or death. It doesn't like sort out stressful danger. It's like danger is danger and you need to be safe. So it wants you to move and act and react. But if you can bring your breath in, control your breathing, there's a reason why special forces are controlled in how to do this, manipulate their breath, because it controls the nervous system response. They're very closely tied, but you can not consider you can't completely remove bad feelings or negative what you might think are negative feelings, but you can decide how to manage them and how to manage your behavior in response to them.
Yeah, it's great that we're having this conversation because I have read that if you think about the emotion different from feeling, emotion
Mhm.
is the body's physiological response to something that it considers to be dangerous or attractive. It's just like
Mhm.
this is your emotional response, and you can't change that. That is what it is because it's
Mhm.
instantaneous, right? It's
Yep.
hormonal, as you're talking about. It's a flush of chemicals in your body. Feeling is what you do with it. Right. And if you think about that, like, okay, I had this reaction. Am I going to react? Am I going to breathe? What am I going to do to process that chemical thing that happened in my body? And that's something you can't control. And
Yes.
I think that's a very helpful way to think about it.
Yeah.
So, Kathy, when someone is going through the doors, which is like ridiculously stressful, it's one of the most stressful things that can happen in one's life. And it can also lead to some of the other most stressful things like moving and changing jobs or getting
Mhm.
a job, a different kind of job. So, what is happening actually in the body and the nervous system? I mean, I'd like to have you talk about that. And then, how can yoga or meditation or some mindfulness practices actually help calm that?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really important point because we are going to be in a heightened arousal around the divorce process. The whole process itself is going to have you at a little more heightened arousal for a period of time, whether your divorce is just a few months or it lasts for longer. There's just always going to be a little bit higher arousal in the nervous system because of that. Long-term stress is more can cause more damage than a short-term stress, like running away from a tiger. Like you get all those hormones, those stress hormones out of your system by running away, and then you're safe. And so that physical activity brings those chemicals down. It's like a discharge. When we're at this heightened level of stress for a long period of time, the stress hormones stay elevated and they don't always get discharged because you're in a hearing or you're in a high conflict discussion, but you're not moving, you're staying put and you're trying to stay composed. So one thing that yoga or other means of moving the body helps to do is to physically discharge some of that built up stress hormone, stress chemicals in the body. And it does not have to be going all out and running 10 miles or biking 50 or doing a HIIT workout. It can simply be gentle stretching where you're able to extend the tissues. You're helping with lymph flow, which is a natural detoxification system in the body. You're also doing this controlled breathing with as you expand the body, you inhale, as you contract the body, you exhale. So even your respiration is helping to release, not just from the physical body, but from the nervous system as well. So you want to do whatever you can with the movement to have a physical release. And then when you're doing mindfulness or meditation, or maybe you're doing breath work, because some people really have a difficult time with sitting still and not having some kind of activity. Perfectly normal. And by the way, for those of you that may or may not know much about meditation, it is not about having no thoughts. It is all about dealing with the ones that come into our mind because that's what our mind is made to do, to think. And so meditation is about like what's coming in here and can I let it go? Can I let it come in and can I let it go? That's really what it's all about. And if that gets a little difficult, come back to paying attention to the breath. And I got off track there. So I lost my train of
That's
thought.
okay.
But meditation, mindfulness, breath work are all about taking you away from all this stuff because most of us spend most of our time in our head. We don't think about our right big toe unless we hit it on something. Like we just don't, or we broke it and we can't walk, something like that. So it takes your mind away from the all the stuff that's up here all the time and brings it back to your physical body, your breath. How does it feel to sit in the chair that you're sitting in? Can you feel your clothes resting against your body? What's the air feel like against your skin? And so it helps to kind of reconnect. I always think of it as a triangle. We've got our physical body, our emotional well being, and our body, mind, and breath, or body, mind, and spirit. All three of those are being supported with movement. If you're doing whatever movement you're doing, your mindfulness practice, and then incorporating the breath work into those, or maybe you have a separate breath work practice. And if you're doing yoga, you're doing all of this at the same time. So a good yoga teacher is incorporating release, restoration, and rejuvenation all in one practice.
Great. I'm Catherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues, a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce related topics so that everyone can divorce with dignity. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to a podcast to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Cathy Eads about yoga and divorce. And Cathy, one thing that is, I have a couple of things that I always think of myself as a yoga failure. And it's because I am not always so flexible, or I have trouble with the poses. Thinking about my breath makes me stop breathing. But I've come over the years to realize that a lot of mindfulness practices can still be very helpful for me. Like, for example, when I am feeling like I'm in a super stressful situation, I'll think about what it feels like to sit on the chair or stand on my feet and feel the solidness of that and think, okay, you know what? I'm really not in danger. I'm going to have dinner tonight. I'm going to go home. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And whatever is happening here is not really, it's very anxiety provoking for the people if I'm working, or even for me. I can notice what that feels like in my body. And as I'm listening to you talk about what, like the mindfulness and meditation not being about having no thoughts, Dan Harris in his book, 10% Happier, like if you read that book, like he does this like little thing, like what's in his mind. And it is actually quite funny and very sort of like relieving, like, oh, well, he wrote a whole book on mindfulness and he's got a whole career that he's made, a second career out of being a mindfulness guy. And the chatter that's in his head is ridiculous. So, and that can make people feel, I think, a lot less self-judgy maybe about it. So, I mean, I don't think yoga is supposed to make you feel like you're judging yourself, but I think for many of us, and I bet some of the listeners feel like, yeah, I'm not good at that.
I hear you, and I think that is very common. I think it is important to remember that our bodies are all different. Some of us are never going to get into the splits. I don't do the splits, quite frankly. My approach to yoga is very therapeutic. It's not about get yourself into the hardest pose or the toughest headstand. I actually don't even do headstands. Also, another thing.
Oh,
That's not,
phew.
I know also that's not good because I come to everything from an Ayurvedic, very therapeutic approach. So, what is good for Catherine isn't necessarily good for Cathy because my body, my primary constitution, my primary dosha, those are all Ayurvedic terms, but needs certain things to be healthy that might be different than someone else's. So, an Ayurvedic approach is really, really very focused on the individual and what is it that they need. But I can also say that across the board, we are divorce specifically is a it's a period of shifting, changing, mobility, as you said earlier in the practice, stress, anxiety, all of those things are from an Ayurvedic perspective. They're vata energy, mobile, airy, drying, depleting, all of that. So, a really good yoga practice for someone going through divorce is going to be more grounding. It's going to be focused on strength in the low body, strength around the pelvis. It's not going to be headstands or anything that's challenging your balance because your environment that you're living in is very challenging for your balance already. And so we want to focus on balancing and strengthening from inside out. So anything that you can do to calm that. And anybody who said, "Oh, I've arrived and I'm the perfect meditator," that's BS. We all have those crazy thoughts. The weirdest things can come in when you're being still. And it can be very uncomfortable for some people to be still and quiet, extremely, even painful for some people. So I don't want anybody to think that they're a failure at something that all of us, every time we show up on the mat or to meditate, every day is different. Every day is different. And what you think you might be able to do one day, you get there and you're like, I actually can't do that today, but I can do this. This feels good for me and my body today. That's what I always tell people. If this feels good, I want you to do this. Try this if this feels good for you. So
Can you give an example of a client that you've worked with and the experience that he or she had, just so that people get a sense of how this might work for someone, even if it's not, if it's different than how it would might work for them?
yeah, I had one client who was she was actually having some breathing problems. And it turned out, her doctors did some lung tests, they did some heart tests, they tested for a lot of things that they thought it could be. And finally, the doctor said to her, I really think this might be manifest. This is your anxiety manifesting in breathing problems. So he goes, I want you to work on calming your anxiety. And he said there are some things you can do. And he said, if you want to go to medication, she said, no, I actually think I can work on this now that I have the awareness that's what's going on. Because her heart was in great shape, lungs were great, passed all the tests with flying colors. So we worked together for 12 weeks. Within the first 2 to 3 weeks, she was like, I'm already like breathing better most of the time. But she said, when I start to feel that shortness, like I can't get a deep breath, she said, I do one of those exercises you told me to do, and then I can get it back. I can calm my nervous system down. She didn't use that term, but I can calm myself down. And then I can start to feel myself be able to breathe more deeply. And she said, I just give myself 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm really feeling more solid. And so we worked together over a year and a half ago, I guess. And she's like, I just go back to what you taught me. If it comes back again, she said, for the most part, I'm not feeling anxious like that anymore. Some things shifted in her life. And then I taught her some methods to use. But she was like, I was just in such a state when I came to you. And she's like, I cannot thank you enough. I didn't really know I could control this myself. And I think I didn't know these things either. When I was growing up, I wish somebody had told me how to just control my breath to help me calm down. I was a real type A, very reactive person for decades. So I don't want anybody to think just because I'm teaching other people to do this now, I had to learn it myself first. And I still do the same things to this day. And if I go for a week and I've missed 5 days out of 7 because life has been crazy, I am not in a good place. Like I know I've got to get back to it. It's just part of what I do to take care of myself. And we were so often taught to push through and to go past what's painful or just uncomfortable and just put our head down. That's not okay. I'm just here to say it's just not okay. We've been trained to think it's normal. It's not okay. It's why so many of us are running around in such a state like this woman was. And that's what I help people to enable them to have the awareness, the self awareness around controlling what they can and build this unshakable calm within themselves. So they know when the world outside is chaotic, the peace that they want is here. It is always here. And you just have to tap back into it. It's really easy to get disconnected from it.
You're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Please subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Cathy Eads about Ayurvedic yoga and divorce and how it can really help you, especially with Cathy's help, to reach a better state of calm is what I'm hearing, Cathy, you say. And I know that you describe your sessions like a little mini retreat. So can you kind of describe how you take someone through a session and how they might experience that from beginning to end?
Yeah, yeah. With my one-on-one clients, I check in the day of their session and say, so what's going on today? What do you want to focus on today? And it might be, my back is killing me, my low back hurts. Or it might be, we had mediation today and I am feeling all over the place emotionally. Whatever the case may be, I like to do that check in, and then I can build the practice around what is it that we most need to focus on. And then we begin with just a settling, like, we say hi to each other and see, chat just a bit, but then we settle in our breath. So we get into a seated position. We really close the eyes, really focus on the breathing, focus on the physical sensation. So I like to work from the outside in because we generally are kind of outward focused. How does the body feel? How does it feel to sit in this position? Like, what sensations do I have in my body? Then we'll bring the attention inward to the breath. And then we come a little more in and talk, I'm just cueing people like, what's going on in your mind? Are there any things that you want to imagine yourself taking hold of and just walking over to the doorway and putting outside for you to pick up when we're done? Because sometimes that just imagining that visualization helps them to kind of just put it to the side for the moment. And then as we start to move, we'll start with some gentle kind of warming up movements. We'll move into a little bit bigger muscle, a little bit more strengthening movement, always, working on that grounding, that strengthening energy. And then we'll eventually kind of work our way back down to the floor and come into a shavasana at the end, which is just, you're lying on your back in complete relaxation. I really love, if we have time, to do a yoga nidra practice, which, if anyone's familiar with or not familiar with that, again, lying completely still on your back. And I'm verbally guiding you through taking your attention from, stay your right big toe, and we walk through different portions of the body. So you're engaging the mind, very focused on these different body parts, but your body and your nervous system is completely relaxed. They've done some studies that about 20 minutes of yoga nidra is equivalent to the rest the body gets and mind gets for 2 hours of nighttime sleep. So it's very
Wow.
soothing and healing for the nervous system and the physical body. And then if a person wants to do breath work at the end, we might end with some breath work. I've also done some things. I do some tapping with folks who want to go there, and some acupressure. So I have some other tools if people are open to using those things, and I think it would be helpful for them.
Cool. So your contact information will be in the show notes, but for those who are listening, Cathy, how can people find out more about what you do and get in touch if they want to?
Yeah, I actually have two websites because I do focus on yoga for divorce. Yogaforddivorce.com is that website. And then my more therapeutic for folks who may or may not be going through divorce, but they have some other therapeutic need, from anxiety to recovery from surgery. That is findblissyoga.com.
Cool. Well, talking about divorce, since this is divorce dialogues, and talking about the feelings, there's so much feeling that goes into the divorce process. And I think that feeling actually is really valuable information for people. And in fact, I just wrote a book called The Emotionally Savvy Divorce. There's a picture of it. It's being published in January 2026, and it's about what to do with your feelings. But in order to be able to really access the information that those feelings have, they can't be overwhelming you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how can yoga and meditation help people find what it is that's really going on with those feelings, why they feel that way, and access that valuable information about their values, their priorities, their maybe even their own self-identification?
Mm-hmm. I think this reconnecting our mind, body, spirit, like really focusing on that. So often, if we start with physical sensation, just because that's very easy for people to say, like, right now my hands are cold. It's cold here today. So my fingers are cold, to say, if I rub my hands together, I can feel that it brings some warmth. What does the sweater that I'm wearing feel like? Coming into that physical sensation first and then moving toward more of the emotional side, because the sweater is very neutral. My fingers being cold, that's neutral. But my anger towards someone, that's not neutral. Like, I need to kind of settle myself into the physical things that are just neutral first. And then I can say, okay, how am I feeling right now? And what do I want to do with that? And why am I feeling that way? Because sometimes we can feel threatened but it's not a real threat. It's a feeling of insecurity. And why am I feeling insecure? Is it because of a financial discussion? Is it what is the insecurity coming from? So you can kind of explore that a little more. But I feel like when you're doing yoga, you're so focused on your physical body. And then when you come into that shavasana, get into that yoga nidra, you're moving to that sort of higher plane of consciousness. And you're just more resilient in general because you've given your body, mind, and spirit all this break from all the stuff that you are dealing with, which quite frankly can be incredibly overwhelming. If so, first of all, have compassion for yourself going through a divorce. As you said, it's one of the most stressful things you can ever go through. And it's okay to feel really out of sorts. And then you can decide how you want to manage that. And I feel like going from the outer toward the inner and building that inner resilience will give you not only like just to feel emotionally better, but it gives you more clarity mentally. And you can kind of just step back from your emotions a little bit and be like, yeah, so I felt triggered by what that person just said. And the reason I feel triggered is because that happened before and then this happened. You can kind of walk your way through it. But right now, I need to deal with the situation right now, not what happened before, not what's going to happen in the future, but right now, what do I need to do that's in my best interest and possibly the best interest of my family and children?
Yeah. I think it's not just okay to feel really out of sorts, it's expected to. And
Mm-hmm.
you're like, everybody feels really out of sorts in some way. And so just locating in the particular way you feel out of sorts as opposed to me or somebody else, think that it's just a matter of that is to be expected. And rather than just give yourself permission to do it, it's just no, because everybody does. It's okay, gravity, it's a thing. I have to live
Right.
with it, right? Yeah, that
Yeah.
has nothing to do with you. It's just what happens, and it's what happens. And so I think when you think about it that way, then there's really no judgment at all. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I shouldn't be that person. I should be. I was taught this. I've always been that, or whatever. So,
Yeah.
Cathy Eads, if someone is listening now, just in our last minute or two, and they're feeling really overwhelmed, whether or not they're getting divorced or for something else, is there some small step or something that they can do like right now to help start them on that calming mind and body journey?
Yeah. I always go first to your breath. And if you can close your eyes, if you're alone and you want to put your hand on your chest and your belly and just count to 6 as you breathe in slowly and fill the whole lungs. Because when we're stressed, we can start to breathe just out of the chest. And we want to fill the whole lung as we count to 6 and then count to 8 on the exhale. And you just do that. Just continue to do that till you will physically start to feel the calm come in. And if you need to start with counting to 4 and then counting to 6 on the exhale because you're really, breathing shallowly, then start there and then go to 6 and 8. It's the simplest thing you can do. And if you're in the middle of a conversation, the other person will only notice you taking a pause if you're not closing your eyes or putting your hands on your body. You're just pausing. And sometimes that actually puts you in a very powerful position because you're not saying anything, you're just breathing. And then the other person's wondering what's going on. you know, you're kind of taking control in the situation because you're so in control of yourself.
Yeah.
That's what I would suggest
And
as a
I think that silence is a very powerful negotiation technique. It's one of the things I talk about in the books, and it's very, very underused. And
mm-hmm.
particularly when we feel really charged up, is we're constantly defending ourselves. But if you stop doing that and you just let there be silence in the room, the other person is likely to say something that reveals some important information about them that you can use to your advantage. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway. Well, Cathy Roberts Eads, thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues. It's really been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Catherine. It's really been a pleasure to be here, and hopefully, we've provided some useful tools for your
Hopefully
listeners.
so. All right.